The reality is that in 2006, Hawking attended a science conference funded by Epstein. Hawking engaged in inappropriate acts with multiple women who were not of age.
Different blind items reference that when he would go to Epstein Island, there was always a young blonde who would be like taking care of him. He would be in the back rooms and he would have naked women grinding on him as he laid on a bed.
You have no idea how creepy this man is.
Stephen Hawking may have been a genius, but he was also a creep, a womanizer, and a cheater. He was someone who belittled others and found peace in living an egotistical life. Accusations against him are quickly removed from the internet, and for whatever reason, everyone keeps trying to protect Stephen Hawking. So let's get into it. If you aren't subscribed to the Let's Get Into It podcast, then you're only getting half the tea. For longer videos, deep dives, and of course, more of me, subscribe to the Let's Get Into It podcast listed in the description below. We're taking a deep dive into Stephen Hawking and how he was a terrible guy. I mean, he was listed on Epstein's list, so he got down with the bad guys and he's been accused of some really inappropriate things. Like, oh my god, in a 2015 email sent to Epstein's then accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell revealed that the physicist might have participated in an orgy. And the internet blew up because imagine Stephen Hawking like it just involved in all of this. I don't want to imagine it. Now, Stephen died in 2018 at the age of 76, and he's one of about 150 names included on Jeffrey Epstein's list. And while being on the list doesn't necessarily mean that you are accused of wrongdoing, we have some creepy stories about Stephen.
Newly released documents show Jeffrey Epstein emailed Ghislaine Maxwell to deny claims that Professor Stephen Hawking participated in underage sexual acts. Hawking, the celebrated wheelchair-bound physicist who died in March 2018, age 76, was among the guests at a barbecue during a conference on the island sponsored by Epstein.
Now, this is what Jeffrey sent to Ghislaine, saying, "You can issue a reward to any of Virginia's friends, acquaintances, family that come forward and help her prove allegations are false. The strongest is the Clinton dinner, the new version in the Virgin Islands that Stephen Hawking's practice in an underage orgy." So he was trying to protect these men and do it at any cost. Photos actually show Stephen Hawking visiting the Epstein Island in 2006 for a very bizarre conference. The conference took place on the island and there were a bunch of people there. A lot of people that are local to this island, like other islands that are nearby, actually called it P-word island, child offender. When Epstein was asked about this conference, he said there's no agenda except fun and physics. That's fun with a capital F. Now, why does it have to start with a capital F? But in general, there really was no agenda for this conference because there was no conference purpose besides bringing these physics out, showing them a good time, exploring, I guess, how far Jeffrey could push them, and that included Stephen Hawking, who he was very entertained by.
There's photo evidence in 2006 of Stephen Hawking on Epstein Island. We have one here of him having dinner, and this one of him in a submarine, which we'll get to later because there's something interesting about this photo. Now, granted, he was here months before Jeffrey Epstein was convicted for the first time of being a offender in Florida. They say that he was here on the island for a science conference that Epstein was hosting, and they were discovering, get this, the gravity on the island.
Why would they need to check the gravity? It doesn't make sense because there is no sense to it. And it's pretty interesting to see that this submarine that was, I guess, questioned to have trafficked people at some point was something that Stephen got into, and he had this mysterious blonde girl with him the entire night in every photo. So why is she being strung along? Another weird thing I found online that I don't even know if this is real, but supposedly Jeffrey was asked about Stephen Hawking's his kinks, and supposedly he was into watching little people undressed solve complex equations on a too high up chalkboard. This can't be real. There's a lot of conspiracies about this guy, but there are some things that are true. Despite being diagnosed with ALS at the age of 21, wheelchair bound and unable to speak, he still had a very active love life, which I think is great. I love normalizing people who are different, finding love. That Love on the Spectrum show on Netflix is my addiction. I am so in love with Connor on there. If you know, you know. But Stephen first married his wife Jane in the 60s. Stephen's condition meant that Stephen always had to be completely passive in intimacy because he is fragile. Over time, his fragility caused Jane that she might actually harm him if they were to get intimate. But Stephen ended up falling for his nurse, Elaine, a fiery redhead who liked to skateboard and definitely knew how to flirt. Maybe one of the reasons they bonded, one says, is because she had the flamboyance he would have exhibited if he had the use of his body. For her part, Elaine wasn't put off by Stephen's physical condition, just the opposite. She was drawn to it. So Elaine and Stephen got married in 1995, so he left his wife for this nurse, but they weren't together that long because in 2006 they divorced when he found love to another nurse 39 years younger than him. So he had his original wife, then left for a nurse, then left for another nurse. What is up with these nurses? They were reportedly engaged at some point, but Stephen called it off because he thought it would cause more problems with his children.
He cheated, allegedly, on his first wife with his nurse, Elaine. So he gets married to Elaine and she loves him. She loves everything about him, does not care if he's handicapped. She loves his mind. But then Elaine said that they divorced in 2006 because he fell for another nurse. And it said that she suffered from manic depression, which is something that Hawking seemed to like.
Now, Jane, his first wife, did release a tell-all book, and she spilled a lot on Mr. Stephen Hawking. She recounted her miserable marriage to the, quote, master of the universe. She probably didn't name him for legal reasons. She explains her determination to stay married to him even as his disease and his ego began to consume him in equal measure. She details how he, for many years, wanted no one but her to wash, clothe, and feed him. He was so reluctant to use a wheelchair that she had been balancing him on with one arm and then holding a toddler with another. Her role became more maternal than marital. Oh my gosh, she wrote something, I don't even think I could say this. And it was becoming very difficult, unnatural, even to desire for someone with a body of something very insensitive victim and the undeniable needs of an infant. So she was not cut out to be with someone who has special needs. She said in society she felt like a second-class citizen, often forced into the wife's corner while the male geniuses talk shop. She claims this made her really depressed and she did not feel fulfilled by their life at all. She actually even felt trapped. She felt like she couldn't go off and leave Stephen because she's the only one who could take care of him, but she needed to take care of herself. Now, Stephen was notorious for cheating on his wives, all of them. And actually some of them fought back, which I do not agree with because he is someone who needs help and cannot defend himself. Like the time in 2003 when one of the nurses called his daughter Lucy to report that he had been badly burned after being left outside in the scorching sun all day. Police opened an investigation interviewing 10 of his current and former nurses, but due to lack of evidence they couldn't figure out who it was. And a lot of people suggested it was his wife, but he just would not accept that. I mean, probably was, he probably knew that, but he would not throw his wife under the bus. And this would have been his second wife, that nurse that he had married and left Jane for. He said, "My wife and I love each other very much, and it's only because of her that I am alive today." After he was taken to the hospital for being in the sun all day, Elaine showed up and she was fighting him, throwing things around the room. She was actually asked to leave, and people came to the understanding that he was cheating on her, and that's why this all happened. That's why she left him in the sun to cook.
We only just learned about the Stephen Hawking cheating on his wives scandal, and I'm genuinely speechless. This man may have been bound to a wheelchair, unable to speak or move, but bro's love life was active. He married his first wife, Jane, in 1965, when they were both in their early 20s. They then remained married for 25 years while Jane fed him, dressed him, bathed him, and sat with him through his many hospital visits and near-death experiences. That was until he fell for his carer, Elaine, who was also married at the time. Stephen then divorced Jane and remarried Elaine in 1995. He remained married to Elaine until, yet again, he fell for another one of his carers. This time, his new carer, Diana, was 39 years younger than him. His marriage with Elaine ended in 2006, and while he did get engaged to Diana, he worried another marriage would cause problems with his 3 children, so he ended up backing out.
He also was a big fan of strip clubs. Quote, "He's a man who lives within his brain and still manages to feel the overwhelming power of sex." Stephen became a regular at Stringfellow's strip club in London. People would just run into Stephen Hawking there. Quote, "I went and introduced myself and said, 'Mr. Hawking, it's an honor to meet you. If you could spare a minute or two, I'd love to chat with you about the universe.' Then I paused for a bit and joked, 'Or would you rather go look at the girls?' There was a silence for a moment and then he answered, 'The girls.'"
And he's like, yeah, he used to go to strip clubs, and there's like videos of him like rolling into a strip club in the wheelchair.
Like he would go, that was his thing.
He cheated on his wife all the time. If you Google Stephen Hawking, he was
Look at him.
he was always fucking around.
Stephen has been spotted at these clubs, and he's also been reportedly spotted receiving multiple lap dances. He's a frequent at a Californian strip club called Devour and another one called Freedom Acres. A member of the club says, "I've seen Stephen Hawking at the club more than a handful of times. He arrives with an entourage of nurses and assistants. Last time I saw him, he was in the back play area lying on a bed fully clothed with 2 naked women all over him." Wow.
They say he goes to strip clubs. That's wild.
Yeah.
Laptop dance. Now for me. Now work it, girl. Take me to the event horizon.
Now, you guys know the Me Too movement has brought forward a lot of survivors, but it's also brought up some fake news. And while Stephen can easily pay someone to say their story is fake and to issue an apology, I've had people threaten me before to issue an apology. One person named Gabrielle, who was 22 in 1994, claims that there's an old memory that haunts her because Stephen Hawking is so intimidating and he held such a high status in academia that she claimed that she was harmed by this man. And later on, there was an apology posted on a website, I think forced by Stephen's team, claiming that this story was completely fake. Now, I don't have the story to share with you guys. I just have this odd article that mentions it and then mentions that it was gone. Now, I don't know if Stephen Hawking was out here harassing people. Was he typing it and just the machine was saying it? But there are people who have been in Hollywood and shared their stories about Stephen Hawking, and this actress actually claims that he was on set watching them perform, and his only reaction was to ask her for a little favor.
Yeah. And Eddie's been talked about, meeting Stephen Hawking and sort of hanging out.
Stephen came to set, and we were very, very nervous. And then afterwards, and they shouted cut, and he wrote down, and we were kind of anxiously waiting, and he said, "Would Felicity please be able to come and give me a kiss?"
Actually, his mother claims that Stephen liked pretty girls, only the pretty one. He had a creepy obsession with Marilyn Monroe, who he referenced in his public speeches. He's on the record saying if he had a time machine, he'd go back to visit Marilyn in her prime. For his 60th birthday, he hired a Marilyn Monroe impersonator, dressed up, and was all over him the entire night. He also kept a portrait of Marilyn in his bathroom, which is pretty weird. When asked about these moments, his team responded that they're very busy and they don't have time to respond to any of this nonsense, none of this gossip. But the gossip keeps on coming, and people just call him a straight up jerk, saying that he mocks anyone who disagrees with him, and he will call a child an idiot because he is so egotistical. He actually called that child an idiot because they believed in God after a near-death experience. He used to run people over with his wheelchair if he did not like them. That's legitimately a crime. Why do people think that's funny? Why is there a report that Stephen Hawking was rumored to run over the toes of people he did not like with his wheelchair? A rumor has it he had a mischievous way of getting back at people he did not like by running them over. Actually, Prince Charles got his feet crushed beneath his wheels in 1977. The prince was intrigued by Stephen Hawking's wheelchair, and Stephen started twirling it around to demonstrate its capabilities and carelessly ran over the prince's toes. When asked about this, Stephen says that it's a malicious rumor. He completely denies it, and he will run over anyone who repeats it. So he definitely had a joking side to him, and that's why people liked him. But there's also something really weird about it all. So I want to hear what you guys think of Stephen Hawking in the comments below, and I'll see you in a new video soon. Bye, guys.